So one of the big questions this offseason for the Saints is what will Brandon Staley's defense look like? Well, I saw a clip on Twitter where Cooper Kupp basically explains it, and then we'll go ahead and break down a play from last year's Saints Phillies game to see if we can see it. I'm Tim. Let's talk Saints.
And here we go. So in 2017, 2018, Sean McVay's offense is ahead of the game. There were times we were running plays, and they have no idea what is going on, and we were just manipulating them, moving them to where we wanted to go. It was stupid. 2019, defenses start catching on. There's a little bit of this Vic Fangio thing that comes on. It's like, okay, late in 2018, there was some stuff that's like showed that they could kind of stop this offense a little bit. But
Fair point. This is something I've been talking about several times on videos where we started seeing right about this time, 2019, 2020, it started and it's picked up speed where that he's basically talking about offense manipulation on the defense, especially throwing the ball. Um, and he's referencing Sean McVay was a big part of that on the back end, but so was Sean Payton, so was Andy Reid. There was a list of guys who could use just situational football and force defenses to do exactly what they wanted the defenses to do. And as he said, defenses started getting smarter and more involved. Vic Fangio, I mean, we saw what he could do last year in Philly once they built that rounded out the defense with some players they needed. And we'll talk about that in a little more in a bit. But he's also going to about ready to tie it in on Brandon Staley, who was a guy that got cut his teeth under Vic Fangio. But he's done in I don't know 30 seconds what takes a little bit of explaining to do, and he's talking fast to get it done. But how all of a sudden the defense started figuring stuff out and started catching up really big, really hard, and I've said this before, the 5,000 yard passer, at least for now, with these defenses, what they're doing, it is a thing of the basically the 20 teens when it was happening almost every year. Hadn't happened since I believe 2021, 22, somewhere in there.
2019, you start seeing some more of this cover four, some of the 6-1 stuff. You see safeties now playing things, from depth and being able to cancel things across. 2020 comes. Brandon Staley gets hired to LA. Brandon Staley was with Fangio in Chicago. Staley, in 1 year, puts together the number one defense in the league.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Staley's thing is all about concept recognition, concept match, being able to be like cancel routes, move on to new things. So now you've got a defense that's not just dropping to spots, but now they're playing the offense.
Right.
Thought that was interesting. And he's about ready to say something else that's really interesting. So now Staley, who, like we said, he said, was with Fangio in Chicago, kind of picked up on this, got his own job with the Rams for 1 year, and then as the head coach of the Chargers, where he was running the defense, kind of building on this a little more, these concepts. And basically what he's saying is what Staley wants to do is, you know, hide what we're going to do as long as possible to the last minute. You know, with different coverages. He rolled through a bunch of them, and if you want to get real technical in there, um, you know, split coverages or quarters or shell coverages on top. Something he mentioned, he slipped in the phrase 6-1, which is kind of a 4-3 concept, which ties into something that Staley is doing, where Kellen Moore said by definition the other day it's a 3-4 defense. But I think that definition is evolving to include like the 6-1, which kind of was at one point more of a 4-3 concept, even man front, more or less. Because I think we did do a little bit of it last year or last couple of years when we were in our basically 4-2. But it's kind of selling out with the defensive line to stop the run. Um, and when you back in on your coverage side, you're going to have about six guys in the box, but you've got some reads in there. You're probably playing some type of zone or matchup zone behind it, and it's designed to stop the run, but to be able to react and defend the pass at the same time. Very important concept because in the modern version of the 3-4, you see an awful lot of similar stuff, and you will see even man fronts. It's not necessarily a hybrid defense. It kind of is by design in some of the stuff they do.
right? And now more and more of this is shifted and molded into this defenses now that are holding these shells and being able to say, hey, you aren't going to see what we're doing pre-snap. We're going to show you late. We're going to bring pressures from all different directions. We're not just going to be dropping into spots. We're going to be matching. We're going to be playing zone stuff underneath. The complexity of the defenses has gotten so much more because the offenses have also started doing so much more that you have to be able to have answers for it defensively. So that's kind of where we're at right now, and it is fun though.
So yeah, I want to play that clip because it's almost a minute and a half, and he's like rattling off, which he's talking 2018, 2019 when this started. We're in 2025, not even 10 years. That is lightning fast for the NFL to evolve in some of the concept that he's talking about. And if you think back, as long as Vic Fangio's been around, I mean, he was a hard and true tested straight through for a guy for most of his career, but he has really started to evolve. Brandon Staley also being part of that evolution of got to mix some stuff up, got to confuse them, got to hide some stuff. We have to force them to do some stuff that we want them to do instead of waiting back and allowing them, the offense, to force us to do stuff we don't want to do. I think it's a valid point. So visually speaking, it's still really hard to concept what Staley may do. But we played Philly last year in week 3, and I was sitting in the dome, and man, I saw some stuff that was just like whoa, which became basically Philly's base defense. A lot of the concepts that Cooper Kupp's talking about, mentioned Fangio, mentioned in Staley. So I think if you take a look at Philly, and I pulled one play out of the game, and we'll break it down real quick. But I think when you pull it all together and you look at it, you go, okay, I have an idea of what I think Brandon Staley is going to do, and answer that question: what the defense is going to look like. I think it's a tall order to bring it in, but I would end it on this. I think one of the things that helps when he's talking about the 6-1, which is, more of a, or I think now there's no such thing as a true it's a 3-4 or 4-3 concept. Uh, they appear to be borrowing from each other, but start and borrow some of these concepts that hopefully as we transition, especially on the defensive line, with our personnel from last year, some of this stuff is going to kick in these techniques uh, and how Staley's going to call it and how he wants it played up front might not be as big as a transition in some cases as if we were starting them all over from scratch for a new defense. So when I saw this pop up on Twitter, I was like, yeah, boom, got it. That's kind of the Staley, you know, up here, 30,000 viewpoint of what Fangio and Staley kind of do defensively. He starts throwing some concepts out there, which are much deeper dive. And I think if he'd have had 10 minutes to talk instead of a minute and a half, we could have all went totally in the black hole about how the defenses are operating now in an effort to stop offenses that like the ones he was a part of, with the Rams and Sean McVay. So pretty interesting stuff, but I think a little insightful from answering some of the questions we have this offseason going into training camp and preseason, which one of which is what's our defense going to look like? So I kind of took a shortcut on this. Just break down a play. Like I said, I was sitting in the Philly game in the dome last year for the Philly game and just seeing, we were kind of marveling, knowing we were playing a Philly Vic Fangio defense, just expecting more of a straight 3-4 like we were used to seeing over the years from Fangio, and shocked early on to start seeing 4, 5, at times 6-man front. It seemed like in just some, we were like, whoa, this is different, and it's not something that I don't think is brand new. We've seen versions of that around the NFL, just not for him and not to the degree that they were doing it. And with Cooper Kupp kind of making the connection between Staley and um, Fangio, and even I'm remembering like specifically those defenses he had in LA going, yeah, he did kind of like to um, be traditionally non-traditional when he was kind of designing these defenses. So you knew it was like Fangio's a 3-4 concept, but it just looked different. The personnel at times were doing things you weren't expecting them to do. Um, Seeing coverages that, you know, didn't really make sense, and then you realize, oh, it's a split coverage. They're doing something on one side of the field different than the other side of the field. Things like that. So when I went into the highlights, it took like 2 or 3 plays, and I was like, "Oh, here's a great example of kind of the stuff Fangio did last year that Staley, um, and some of the concepts he was talking about, Cooper Kupp was talking about at Fangio and Staley and other defensive coordinators over the last few years have kind of had to incorporate into coming up with a way to stop the offense." On this play, it is a definite even man front. This is right after the snap, so you can see the 4 down linemen coming off the ball. They lined up on the line of scrimmage. You had a defender at the bottom of the screen. He's basically standing on the 8 of the third and 8, who was kind of wide and off the ball, almost like a typical edge rusher. But I have a hard time seeing his number, but I think that's Darius Slay, the cornerback. You also see right above him, slightly to the right, one of the off the ball linebackers. And then at the top of your screen, in between the 1 and the two down defensive linemen, is Zach Baun. At the snap of the ball, both those guys kind of crept up a little bit towards the line of scrimmage while everybody else is firing off the ball and they're pretty much selling out. But those two off the ball guys, they're kind of in a read situation because they went forward. There was, I don't want to say a hesitation because they were reading into the backfield. Alvin Kamara's coming out on Baughn's side, so I think Baughan clearly read, pass, cover because Alvin's coming out to his side, where the other defender read pass. I'm blitzing. I've got no cover responsibility, so I'm going. That kind of concept of sending blitzes and coverages at different sides of the field from different positions. I should say different sides of the defensive formation from different positions. Really, to to that keep the offense honest and force them or try to force them into doing things we want them to do. Now, I also think, and this is a guess, but I'm pretty sure had Alvin released towards the middle of the field or came across the formation down towards the bottom of your screen, those two read responsibilities would have flipped. Probably the the off the ball guy who's now blitzing would be picking up Alvin, and Baun would be going in on the blitz, which would be a heavy blitz on the left side of our line because that's where most of the defensive line pressure is coming from. You'd have just had Zach Baun thrown into that mix. Now, what you're seeing here is out there as three of our primary receivers, and technically four, but one of them's going to go off screen in a second. You're starting to see the matchup. Baughn's going to grab Kamara. Olave's at the top of the screen. He's running into a corner that's lined up 10 yards off the ball, basically, and getting into a matchup there. Our tight end is coming out and getting matched up at the bottom of the screen. Shaheed is coming right now, has nobody on him, but there's somebody in the secondary that's about ready to grab him. Now, what I don't know is exactly what's going on in the coverage of the secondary on this play because I can't see most of them. And I don't know how the back end really lined up initially, other than you had a corner 10 yards basically off the ball in Olave that's matching up with him now as Olave's coming off the line. And you kind of can't see whatever everything's going on. So I'm guessing matchup zone, but it could be. You'll see it at the end of the play. There's something that tells me this might have been straight zone the whole time. Guess it is some type of straight man or matchup zone situation going on in the secondary. And I'm going to kind of fast to avoid problems with YouTube, kind of fast forward a little bit on this play into now. This is what's going on downfield. And you can kind of start seeing the matchups here as they were playing. Actually, the Saints played this one. This is like very early in the game. I think McCoy had not gotten hurt yet on that first drive. It might actually be on the very next play after this when it happened. So we did a great job of picking up everything that's going on the front. We got the ball downfield. Whatever this matchup or zone or man or whatever was going on here, they had it covered up pretty good. But Olave on a deep cross beats his guy, gets open, and Carr puts the ball right on him for completion. But you can see here that the matchups, my screen is blocking the one on the bottom, but you can't even really see Shaheed and whoever picked him up. They're almost off screen. There's a defender there standing there basically doing nothing right above them. But outside of that, too, you had Vaughn and Olave at the top of your screen, Shaheed downfield with, I still think that might be Darius Slay, and then possibly Quinion Mitchell on Olave here. So as that matchup plays out, this is what I don't know towards the end of the play. Coming in from the top right of your screen, all of a sudden, were we in a single high safety look the whole time? Because here comes Reed Blankenship, their free safety, with all of our receivers are pretty much accounted for at this point. I don't think he was picking up anybody deep. So they could have been a straight man the whole time, single high, and he was just back there playing center field and coming up once the ball was thrown. To sum up, you know, we heard what Cooper Kupp had to say and kind of talked about that a little bit. We tried to apply it in practice with one play, which at that point, very early in the first drive of Philly, we basically had our offense, which had been performing at its best, with its best players on the field, because we were going to lose McCoy shortly, and then that started something that's, you know, we all know how that all went. But showing how here's some of the concepts Vic Fangio's using that, Cooper Kupp is saying he ain't the only one. Brandon Staley's doing it. Brandon, and even though he didn't say it, he could add it on. And now Brandon Staley's in New Orleans, and we'll get to see it again. So I think it's a good. I'm really glad that was Joel Moran posted it. Ross Jackson retweeted it. That's where I saw it. Thank you, Ross. Thank you, Joel, for that. Because it really, when I saw it, it really clicked in and went, that's just a very simple explanation you could follow for something that is actually kind of very, very complicated if you want to get down in the weeds with it. But if they make that transition to this defense, if the personnel can make the transition, and knowing that some components, some parts of it are 4-3 concepts, techniques that, hey, that's what our guys have been playing the last couple of years up front. Maybe able to lean in a little more on that without actually having to form some type of hybrid or crazy defense. In a way, this is almost is a hybrid defense, but I like to think it's more a 4-3 concept applied to 3-4 rules with the personnel able to fill it in. I also say this. This is one of the things that, and I haven't mentioned this in any of his dealings with the media, but Kellen Moore several times when asked about the edge guys, I'm more about their weight, dropping weight, trying to become more explosive and playing out wide. But he mentioned several times they're doing a great job with their drops and reads, and it kind of went like something I didn't even really picked up on. Shame on me, should have, because that's exactly what's going on with these. Because even though their edge rushers line up on the line of scrimmage, they do have some similar off the ball responsibilities. Just like where you saw Zach Bone there, who's an off the ball linebacker, was basically creeping up almost to an edge rush position, about ready to blitz. Not quite, but pretty close. And I've seen sometimes where Philly did line him up like that and used him that way. But the read right off, oh, Kamara's coming out this way. My responsibility is to take him in coverage, pick him up. And the other off the ball guy going, I got nobody, nothing going on. I'm going to try to sack the quarterback. That's my read. So understanding now after breaking that down, and there was a play on the highlights right before this on a running play um, that I almost showed where we're running the ball and both their edge guys in that stand up position. Because I don't want to say it's a hesitate. I can look at it and know it was a read. It was a 3rd and short that we picked up the first down on. And their reaction was no pass go. So it's second that they realized we were running the ball, they were crashing down in there. But had we pulled the ball out of some type of play action on 3rd and 2 or whatever it was, they were ready to start jumping on it. Anything coming out the backfield or a tight end, say, coming right off the line of scrimmage. So I may at some point go a little deeper in this Philly game and try to maybe find a little more of the concepts, or God forbid, start rolling through some old San Diego Rams stuff. But I didn't want to go too far back because, I'm going to end it with this. that the NFL used to evolve offensively and defensively very slowly. And even when somebody came out with a new concept of how to play defense or run an offense and score points, generally speaking, the other 30 something teams or 20 something teams, depending on what year it was, took 2 or 3 years just to poo poo all over the idea that it's never going to work until it started working. Then it became a copycat league and everybody tried to figure it out. But even that process was slow moving a lot of times. Not so much more in the NFL. It's a copycat league with an agenda and a desire. Most teams, we were a little late to the party, I think, but we're finally catching on. Going, this is what you're going to have to bring to the table. Both sides of the ball. Cooper Kupp basically said that if you want to have a good offense and good defense, this is the way you got to think in the concepts that you got to throw in there, and you have to be able to do it on offense to score points and move the ball against defenses designed now specifically to stop offenses doing what they're doing. Right? Hopefully we're on the right track with that. And, we're a little late to the party, but better late than never. So there you go. That's what we have for you today. Just a quick look, quick take from Cooper Kupp, breaking down some film. Hopefully it presents somewhat of a picture of what we may be seeing starting in preseason and then rolling into the regular season. And geez, hopefully it works, right? So if you're first time here, you like what you saw, please go ahead, hit the subscribe for me. Go ahead and give me the thumbs up. Let's keep making the algorithm happy. A happy algorithm is a happy Tim. So thank y'all very much for y'all support. And we'll keep trying to answer these questions as the offseason progresses, moving into training camp. Do my best. I think we've got some pinning stuff coming up real soon that will likely be the next one. And maybe something on Alvin Kamara. So till I see you next time, I'm Tim. Peace out and who dat.